What's going on? All right, so this is your homework support for EL1 Interpreting Lines of Poems, which is the first unit of semester 2. We're diving into poetry for Black History Month, so we're looking at poems for, by, and about Black people. All right. Uh, Today's lesson was simply about interpreting lines of poems. When we say interpretation, we're talking about trying to understand the meaning of particular lines in a poem. And we want to think about the language being used, specifically looking at figurative language and how figurative language can help us to come to a nice understanding of what a line could possibly mean within a poem. Some of the figurative language that we talked about today was more about review. So we kind of started in a very familiar space. So we have our metaphors. From there, we also brought up similes and personification. Sorry, we'll go back to that. And personification. And then we also did imagery. And so those were the core. And so as we read lines in a poem, we wanted to try to figure out, well, what do I see? Do I see a metaphor? Do I see personification? Do I see imagery? And then being able to say, what did that metaphor, that symbol, that personification do to help me understand what this poem could possibly mean, or what this line could possibly mean. All right. Now the steps that we did for this are these, and I'm going to try to show this because every time I move this, it happens to go off, so we'll see if it stays. And so I'm going to show you the model that we did in class that goes with this particular line. And it's going to come up off on this screen here so you can kind of see what that looks like. Okay? So, bring this around. So this would be what you would do. And so we'll make a T-chart. You don't have to. Some people did bullet point, and that's perfectly fine. The first step is that we want to think about the title, and that's going to tell us what the entire poem is about. So I'm starting here. We're going to jump up because we had this for the do now. So I'm going to be jumping around. So here, number one, the poem is America, and it's by Claude McKay, written in 1925. And so, one, my title is America. So I know that this poem is about America. From that point, I then want to think about the subject. So I want to choose a line. In this case, this line is what I chose. Although she feeds me bread of bitterness, choose a line and then identify the subject. Who or what are we talking about in this line? In this case, we know she, the pronoun she, and the pronoun me. Me is referring to the poet, and so we know the poet is one. But then she is referring to someone or something. In this case, we know I told them that this was the very first line of this poem. So she refers to America. So already at this point, you know there's personification happening because America is now someone who's able to do something, in this case, feed another individual. So we know personification is already there. Then we want to think about what it's saying about the subject. So what exactly does this line say about America and about the poet? In this case, it's saying that America feeds the poet bread of bitterness. Don't push yet, and you can eventually you will. There's some of us who can already think and see what we're going to say, and you may skip to see, but to kind of just break it down, don't skip. Just literally just change what you have. So 2A is like identifying the subject. B is now just switching out pronouns for the subjects that you know. Taking out she, putting America. Taking out me, putting the poet. So when you definitely know who is the subject, just change it, but keep everything else the same. C is now trying to break this down even more. So now let me go back into my first breakdown and think about how I can break this down more. So I know I'm not literally talking about feeding. I'm not literally talking about bread of bitterness. So what am I talking about? And so in class, people say, well, feed is something that, like it's like giving somebody something. You provide food or provide things when you feed. And so America gives, America feeds, because you want to make sure you keep the focus still in your breakdown so you don't forget this is what I'm talking about. And then when it came to bitterness, people said, oh, well, bitterness is like having a bad attitude, being disappointed, being angry, having negativity. And so the poet is who's getting the bread of bitterness. So the poet is the one getting the anger or getting the disappointment, or getting the negativity, or getting the attitude. And so That was our breakdown there. So then from that point, you then, on this side, give your interpretation. So what exactly does this line mean, and how did figurative language get you there? And so you will then get an answer like this.